In the second part of Module 1, we will introduce the basic concepts of the human body in health and disease. Each of these topics will be expanded on in much greater detail in Module 2. We will look at anatomic reference systems, structures of the body, genetics, tissues, glands, body systems and related organs, and pathology. By the end of Module 1b, you should be able to define anatomy and physiology and the uses of anatomic reference systems to identify the anatomic position, planes, directions, and cavities. You should be able to recognize, define, spell, and pronounce the primary terms related to cells and genetics. You should be able to recognize, define, spell, and pronounce the primary terms related to the structure, function, pathology, and procedures of tissues and glands. And finally, you should also be able to identify the major organs and functions of the body systems. And you should be able to recognize, define, spell, and pronounce primary terms used to describe the pathology, modes of transmission, and types of diseases. We use terms to describe the locations of the structural units of the body. In simplistic terms, your right hand versus your left hand. In medical terminology, however, we also use body planes, body directions, body cavities, and structural units. When body parts work together to perform a related function, they are grouped together and are hence known as a body system. Anatomy is the study of the structures of the body. Physiology is the study of the functions of the structures of the body. Note the difference. As you see in this slide, our anatomic position describes the body standing in the standard position, which includes standing up straight so that the body is erect and facing forward, holding the arms at the sides with the hands turned out so that the palms face forward toward the front. Body planes are imaginary vertical and horizontal lines used to divide the body into sections for descriptive purposes. These planes are aligned to a body standing in the anatomic position. There are three body planes of which you should be aware: the sagittal plane, the mid-sagittal plane, and the frontal plane. Then we have the horizontal planes, the transverse plane. You'll now like to turn to the learning activity in StudyWare to watch the body planes animation to help illustrate these important points. The relative location of sections of the body or of an organ can also be described through the use of pairs of contrasting body direction terms. As you see illustrated in this slide, we see some comparisons: ventral versus dorsal, for example, anterior versus posterior. Take a moment to review these terms in your text and on this slide. It will be much easier to recall these if you can remember them in pairs. In this section, we also look at major body cavities. The dorsal cavity is located along the back of the body and head and contains organs of the nervous system that coordinate body functions. It is divided into two portions: the cranial cavity and the spinal cavity. We then have the ventral cavity, which is located along the front of the body and contains the body organs that sustain homeostasis. The ventral cavity, in turn, is divided up into the thoracic cavity, the abdominal cavity, and the pelvic cavity. Note there is no physical distinction between the abdominal and pelvic cavities. As such, the term abdominal pelvic cavity refers to these cavities as one single unit. There are regions of the thorax and abdomen which you should be aware, and there are 9 regions outlined in this slide: the hypochondriac region, the epigastric region, your right and left lumbar regions, the umbilical region, right and left iliac regions, and the hypogastric region. Describing where an organ or pain is located is much easier when dividing the area into 4 imaginary quadrants: the right upper quadrant, right lower quadrant, left upper quadrant, or left lower quadrant. Now we will turn to the peritoneum, which is a multi-layered membrane that protects and holds the organs in place within your abdominal cavity. The peroneal peritoneum is the outer layer, the mesentery is a fused double layer, and the visceral peritoneum is the innermost layer. Next we look at the structures of the body. The body is made up of increasingly larger and more complex structural units. They are, from largest to smallest, body systems, organs, tissues, and cells. Cells are the basic building block of the body. They're specialized, working together to form tissues and organs. Cytology is a study of the anatomy, physiology, pathology, and chemistry of the cell, and a cytologist is a specialist who studies and analyzes these cells. On this slide, we review cell structure. The nucleus is the innermost part of the cell, which is surrounded by the nuclear membrane and serves the functions of controlling the activities of the cell and helping the cell to divide. Cytoplasm is the material within the membrane and is not part of the nucleus. The cell membrane is the tissue that surrounds and protects the cell contacts. Stem cells are unique from other cells for two key reasons. They are unspecialized cells that are able to renew themselves for long periods of time by cell division. This is in contrast to specialized cells that serve a specific function and die after a set amount of time. Under the right conditions, stem cells can be transformed to serve a specific function, thus their key role in medicine and scientific discovery. There are two types of stem cells: adult stem cells, which are also known as somatic stem cells. There are many potential therapeutic uses, including transplants from one individual to another, but an excellent match must exist in order to avoid graft versus host disease. And then we have embryonic stem cells. These types of stem cells can grow rapidly in the laboratory environment and as such are a potential source for adult muscle, liver, bone, or blood cells. Matches need not be perfect, as is the case with adult stem cells. These cells are found in umbilical cord blood. A gene is the fundamental physical and functional unit of heredity. They control our hereditary disorders and all physical traits, such as your hair, skin, and eye color. Dominant genes produce a condition or trait when inherited from either offspring. In a recessive gene, it would need to be inherited from both offspring in order to produce the condition. The Human Genome Project was the first complete mapping of the human genome. This project took over 13 years to complete. This data is key to studying the use of genetics in health and science. The next step in the Human Genome Project is to attempt to understand the proteins encoded by the sequence of these 30,000 genes. As a learning activity, visit the link outlined in this slide and watch a little Genome TV. While on that website, see if you can locate the following definitions: chromosomes, DNA, genetic mutation, and genetic disorders. A tissue is a group or layer of cells with similar function. There are four main types: epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. Epithelial tissue forms a protective covering for all internal and external surfaces of the body. Connective tissue supports and connects organs and other body tissues. And muscle tissue contains specialized cells which have the ability to contract and relax. Nerve tissues contain cells with the specialized ability to react to stimuli and to conduct electrical impulses. Disorders of tissue include incomplete tissue formation, such as aplasia or hypoplasia. Anaplasia is a change in the structure of cells in their orientation to each other. This is characteristic of cancer tumor cells. Diplasia is the abnormal development of or growth of cells, tissues, or organs. Hyperplasia is the enlargement of a tissue or organ because of an abnormal increase in the number of cells. And hypertrophy is a general increase in the bulk of a body part or organ due to an increase in size only of the cells in the tissue. Next we turn to glands, and it's time for a learning activity. Watch the endocrine and exocrine glands animation in your studyware. A gland is a group of specialized epithelial cells that are capable of producing secretions. Secretions are the substances that are produced by a gland. Now we turn to our next objective of understanding body systems. A body organ is a somewhat independent part of the body that performs a specific function. Each of these systems will be explored in greater detail in the following modules. But for now, take a look at Table 2.1 for a sneak peek of the major body systems and their functions. Pathology means the study and identification of disease, and a pathologist is somebody who does just that. An etiologist, on the other hand, studies the causes of diseases. Let's visit CDC to understand more about disease and to read about practical examples of pathogens, communicable diseases, transmission vehicles, epidemiology, and the differences between an endemic, an epidemic, and a pandemic. As our average lifespan gets longer, a larger portion of the population are affected by disorders related to aging. Let's consider for a moment the implications of aging on our healthcare systems. And now let's turn to our learning exercises for this component of Module 1. You should play the interactive games on StudyWare for further practice, and you should complete the learning exercises in Chapter 2. And review. Review the learning goals for Module 1, Part A and Part B to test your mastery. Then you should visit the discussion board and participate in the moderated discussion. This concludes Module 1.